The Nexus Military Academy had processed 47,000 cadets from 218 worlds over its 3-century existence. Dean Vothkar considered himself reasonably well versed in the peculiarities of various species' physiological requirements. The Kriskar needed mineral supplements. The Hegemony spawn required low-gravity chambers. The Void-Touched couldn't handle standard atmospheric pressure without their breathing apparatus. What the Academy had never encountered was a species that actively ignored basic survival protocols. "They're doing it again," muttered Lieutenant Zess, his mandibles clicking nervously as he watched the observation feeds from Orientation Block 7. "The bipeds from the Sol system." Vothka sighed and adjusted his viewing screen. 3 humans, the Academy's first exchange students from Earth, were casually strolling through the environmental adaptation chamber. The chamber currently simulated the atmospheric conditions of Kepler 442b, roughly twice standard gravity, with ambient radiation levels that would sterilize most organic matter within minutes. "Have they activated their protective gear?" Vothka asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, sir. They appear to be conversing about food preferences." Indeed, the humans were engaged in what their translators indicated was a spirited debate about something called pizza toppings. The female was gesturing emphatically while explaining why pineapple belongs on Hawaiian pizza, and anyone who disagrees can fight me. Her companions seemed to find this declaration either amusing or deeply offensive. The translation matrix struggled with human emotional nuances. "Sir," Zeth continued, "the radiation monitors are malfunctioning. They keep displaying readings that suggest the humans are actually absorbing the gamma exposure. Equipment malfunction, obviously." Vothka made a note to have maintenance check the sensors. "Run a full diagnostic." The humans had moved on to discussing something called spicy food tolerance, which apparently involved deliberately consuming chemical irritants for entertainment. The male with the darker pigmentation was claiming he could handle ghost peppers like candy, while his companion insisted that Carolina Reapers were barely seasoning. "Sir?" A new voice belonged to Dr. Helix 9, the Academy's chief medical officer. Her usually pristine blue skin had taken on a concerning purplish hue. "We need to discuss the human medical evaluations." "Problems with their physiology?" Vothka asked absently, still watching the humans navigate what should have been a lethal obstacle course, with the casual indifference of tourists at a botanical garden. "Not problems, exactly." Dr. Helix 9 pulled up a holographic display. "Their bone density is approximately 3 times higher than any species we've documented. Their muscle fiber composition suggests they evolved in gravitational conditions that would crush most civilized beings. And their immune systems..." She paused, manipulating the display to show cellular structures that looked like microscopic war machines. "Their immune systems appear designed to combat pathogens that don't exist anywhere in known space. It's as if they evolved specifically to survive conditions that would qualify as biological warfare scenarios." "Deathworld adaptations?" Vothka nodded knowingly. "Earth received a Class 7 hazard rating. We expected some hardiness." "Sir, I've been reviewing the planetary classification data." Dr. Helix 9's voice carried an edge of something approaching panic. "I believe there may have been a clerical error in Earth's assessment." On the screen, the humans had discovered the Academy's emergency ration dispensers. They were sampling various nutritional supplements designed for different species and providing what appeared to be restaurant reviews. "This tastes like chicken," one announced cheerfully, while consuming a protein bar intended for silicon-based life forms. "Everything tastes like chicken to you," his companion replied. "Remember when you said that about the Andorian fungus?" "That wasn't my fault," How was I supposed to know it was still alive? Vortka felt a familiar headache building behind his primary eyes. What kind of clerical error? Well, sir, Class 7 indicates a world with elevated environmental hazards but still capable of supporting complex life. However, based on the human physiological data, I believe Earth should have been classified as a Class 12. Class 12 worlds are theoretical, Doctor. They represent conditions so extreme that complex life couldn't possibly evolve. Yes, sir. That's what I thought too. The silence stretched uncomfortably as they watched the humans complete their orientation exercise by accidentally setting a new academy record for environmental adaptation. They had somehow managed this while maintaining a running commentary about something called reality television, which apparently involved watching other members of their species endure contrived hardships for entertainment. Dr. Helix 9, Vortka said carefully, are you suggesting that we've admitted students from a world that shouldn't be able to support life? I'm suggesting, sir, that we may have accidentally recruited cadets from a planet so hostile that its inhabitants evolved into something resembling naturally occurring weapons of mass destruction. The humans had finished their orientation and were now critiquing the Academy's architecture, suggesting that the concrete looked a bit flimsy and wondering if the seismic dampeners were up to code. One was casually carrying a piece of equipment that had been fused into slag by the radiation exposure, apparently as a souvenir. Sir, Lieutenant Zess interrupted quietly, the humans are requesting permission to begin combat training exercises. They seem enthusiastic about the opportunity. Dean Vortka stared at the display for a long moment, watching three beings who had just survived conditions designed to test the limits of galactic military endurance, and who were now disappointed that the experience hadn't been more challenging. Cancel all combat exercises pending further review, he said finally, and somebody find out who approved Earth for the exchange program. 3 weeks later, against his better judgment and direct orders from the Galactic Education Oversight Committee, Vortka found himself in the Tactical Observation Dome, overlooking Training Ground Sigma. The committee had insisted that excluding the humans from mandatory combat simulations would constitute species discrimination. The lawyers had gotten involved. Paperwork had been filed. The humans, blissfully unaware of the administrative chaos they'd caused, had simply asked when they could get to the fun stuff. Now Vortka watched alongside representatives from 12 different military academies, all eager to witness what they assumed would be an educational disaster. The simulation was designed around the Battle of Therium Prime, a historical engagement that tested strategic thinking, technological adaptation, and survival instincts against overwhelming odds. The scenario parameters are quite reasonable, announced Commander Thrix Val of the Centurion War College. Standard atmospheric conditions, conventional weaponry, clearly defined objectives. Even primitive species should manage adequately. General Crocs of the Dominion snorted through his respiratory slits. Primitive species don't belong in military academies. This exercise will demonstrate why advancement requires proper evolutionary development. The simulation began with cadets divided into opposing forces on a barren landscape, dotted with defensive positions and scattered equipment caches. Most species approached the exercise methodically, scouting positions, analyzing weapon systems, establishing communication protocols. The humans immediately started building something. "What are they constructing?" asked Captain Helix 9, leaning forward in her observation chair. According to the tactical display, they're improvising fortifications using simulation debris and standard-issue equipment, Lieutenant Zess reported, his voice carrying that familiar note of confused concern. On the field below, the humans had somehow converted training obstacles into what appeared to be siege engines. The female, designated Cadet Martinez, according to the roster, was explaining something enthusiastically to her companions while wielding a piece of communications equipment like a weapon. Trebuchet physics are basically just applied gravity and leverage, she was saying. If we can get the trajectory right, we can launch these supply containers directly into their command post. That's assuming they don't adapt to our tactics, replied Cadet Thompson, the male who had previously consumed silicon-based nutrients. But if we create multiple firing positions and coordinate timing. The third human, Cadet Okafor, was disassembling what appeared to be a standard field generator. This power source is completely overkill for a communications array. If we reverse the polarity and redirect the energy flow through the targeting system, they're weaponizing educational equipment, General Crox observed with something approaching admiration. That's actually quite innovative. Innovative? Commander Thrixval sputtered. It's barbaric. They're treating a strategic exercise like some sort of primitive warfare simulation. Isn't that exactly what it is? Asked a new voice. Colonel Kethprime from the Nexus Advanced Tactical Institute had been quietly taking notes. We designed these exercises to test combat effectiveness under pressure. The humans appear to be demonstrating superior adaptive problem-solving. The simulation had devolved into chaos. While other species engaged in careful, methodical combat using approved tactics, the humans had somehow turned the exercise into what could only be described as creative destruction. They had constructed multiple improvised weapons, established a supply line using repurposed equipment, and were coordinating attacks with hand signals and what appeared to be modified recreational songs. "Contact left! Contact left!" Cadet Martinez shouted cheerfully while operating what had formerly been an atmospheric processor as some sort of projectile launcher. "Suppressing fire," Thompson responded, using a communications array to generate electromagnetic interference that disabled several opposing teams' equipment simultaneously. "Why are they enjoying this so much?" whispered Dr. Helix 9, who had joined the observation group. "Most species find combat simulations stressful. The humans appear to be having fun." Indeed, the humans were displaying what could only be characterized as recreational enthusiasm for simulated warfare. They had developed complex strategies, adapted equipment in ways that violated several engineering principles, and were coordinating with an efficiency that suggested extensive prior experience with organized violence. "Sir," Lieutenant Zess announced, "the humans have achieved all primary objectives and are now completing optional secondary challenges that other teams considered impossible." "How long have they been at this?" Vorthka asked. 47 minutes, sir. The previous Academy record was 6 hours and 32 minutes. Colonel Kethprime set down his notes. "I need to update our tactical assessment protocols. If these results are representative of human military potential." "They're not military," Vorthka protested. "They're exchange students from an agricultural collective." The humans had apparently grown bored with conventional victory and were now experimenting with increasingly elaborate tactical solutions. Cadet Okafor had converted a field kitchen into what appeared to be a chemical warfare device, while Martinez and Thompson coordinated what they termed synchronized mayhem protocols. "General Crox," Commander Thrixval said carefully, "didn't your species spend 3 centuries developing the tactical innovations these humans just improvised in under an hour?" General Croc's silence spoke volumes. "Perhaps," Colonel Kethprime suggested diplomatically, "we should reconsider our assumptions about primitive species and military effectiveness." Below them, the humans were critiquing their own performance with the casual expertise of career military specialists, discussing optimal firing solutions and resource allocation strategies, while treating the entire exercise as what they termed a decent warm-up. Vothka realized that the humans weren't just succeeding at military exercises, they were accidentally revolutionizing them. The xenobiology laboratory beneath the academy buzzed with activity that would have impressed a research station. Dr. Helix 9 had requisitioned equipment from 6 different departments, called in specialists from across the sector, and somehow convinced the Galactic Medical Authority to classify the human examination as urgent priority research. "The cellular regeneration rates are impossible," announced Dr. Vex Kurlo, the galaxy's leading expert in evolutionary biology. His crystalline structure flickered with agitated patterns as he reviewed the data streams. According to these readings, human tissue can repair damage that would permanently disable most organic species. "That's not the concerning part," Dr. Helix 9 replied, manipulating a holographic display showing human cardiovascular systems. "Look at their blood chemistry. They produce natural stimulants that would qualify as military-grade combat enhancers if synthesized artificially." Across the laboratory, researcher Kul Netej was examining bone density scans with the sort of fascination typically reserved for archaeological discoveries. These skeletal structures evolved to withstand impact forces that exceed standard kinetic weapon thresholds. Their joints are reinforced with cartilage configurations that suggest regular exposure to extreme physical stress. "Regular exposure to what kind of stress?" Dr. Vex Kurlo inquired. "Based on these adaptations, I'd estimate constant gravitational variance, frequent collision trauma, and sustained periods of resource scarcity requiring enhanced metabolic efficiency." Dr. Helix 9 pulled up comparative evolutionary charts. Most species develop specialized advantages: enhanced sensory perception, improved cognitive processing, environmental adaptations to specific conditions. Humans appear to have developed general-purpose survival mechanisms that work across multiple threat categories. "That's evolutionary nonsense," protested Dr. Yintke, the Academy's head of biological sciences. "No single species can optimize for every environmental challenge simultaneously. The metabolic costs would be prohibitive." "Unless," researcher Kul Netej said slowly, "they evolved in conditions where every environmental challenge occurred simultaneously." The laboratory fell silent, except for the humming of analysis equipment. "Show me their neurological scans," Dr. Vex Kurlo requested. The holographic display shifted to reveal human brain structures that defied conventional understanding of organic cognitive architecture. Neural pathways formed redundant networks with backup systems that suggested preparation for regular brain trauma. The stress response mechanisms were so sophisticated, they resembled military-grade threat assessment protocols. "Their brains are wired for constant tactical evaluation," Dr. Helix 9 observed. "Pattern recognition, threat assessment, resource allocation, strategic planning, all operating as baseline cognitive functions rather than specialized skills." "What kind of environment requires every individual to think like a military strategist?" Dr. Yintke asked. "Out where thinking like anything else gets you killed," researcher Kul Netej replied grimly. Dr. Vex Kurlo was examining genetic markers with increasing alarm. These adaptation signatures suggest exposure to toxins, pathogens, radiation, extreme temperatures, atmospheric variance, and predation pressure from multiple sources, simultaneously, for extended evolutionary periods. "How extended?" Dr. Helix 9 asked. "Based on genetic drift patterns? Millions of years. Their entire evolutionary development occurred under conditions that would sterilize most worlds within decades. The implications hung in the air like toxic gas." "Dr. Helix 9, Dr. Yintke said carefully, What exactly did Earth's planetary survey report say about surface conditions? Standard agricultural world, moderate climate zones, diverse but manageable ecosystem, some geological instability but within acceptable parameters for complex life development. When was this survey conducted? Approximately 400 years ago. Standard remote sensing protocols. Researcher Kulnay Tej looked up from his genetic analysis. Remote sensing wouldn't detect evolutionary pressure indicators. You'd need extensive biological sampling to identify adaptation patterns this extreme. Are you suggesting the survey was incomplete? Dr. Vexkal asked. I'm suggesting the survey was catastrophically inadequate, Dr. Helix9 replied. Based on human physiology, Earth isn't a standard agricultural world. It's a nightmare planet that somehow produced apex predators capable of complex reasoning. Dr. Yinthka pulled up the Academy's species database. Cross-represented human capabilities against known military enhancement programs. The results were unsettling. Human baseline physiology exceeded artificial enhancement protocols used by elite military units across multiple civilizations. Their natural biochemistry produced compounds that required sophisticated laboratory synthesis in other species. Their skeletal and muscular systems outperformed mechanical augmentation systems. They're not enhanced, Dr. Vexkola concluded. This is their natural state. Which means, researcher Kulneta added, we've been treating naturally occurring biological weapons as primitive agricultural students. Biological weapons? Dr. Yinthka protested. Consider the evidence. They're radiation-resistant, toxin-immune, capable of surviving in hostile atmospheres, physically resilient enough to withstand kinetic impacts, neurologically optimized for tactical thinking, and biochemically enhanced for sustained combat performance. What would you call that? An evolutionary arms race survivor, Dr. Helix9 said quietly. The question is, what were they racing against? The laboratory's communication system activated, displaying an urgent message from the Academy's administrative offices. All department heads report to the Dean's conference room immediately. Priority Alpha Protocol. The human cadets have submitted a formal proposal to redesign the Academy's entire combat training curriculum. They claim the current system is inadequate for preparing students for real-world scenarios and have offered to demonstrate proper military preparedness protocols using Earth-standard training methods. The medical team exchanged glances that conveyed mutual understanding of impending catastrophe. Should we warn them? Researcher Kyul Tej asked. Warn them about what? Dr. Helix9 replied. That we accidentally admitted students from a world so hostile it produced natural-born military specialists who consider our advanced combat training inadequate? Vexkola observed. Then yes, we absolutely should warn them. One standard year later, the Nexus Military Academy's graduation ceremony had attracted unprecedented attendance. Representatives from every major military power, educational institution and diplomatic corps in known space filled the ceremonial amphitheater. What had begun as routine curiosity about primitive exchange students had evolved into something approaching galactic strategic concern. Fleet Admiral Kes Torvin of the United Defense Coalition adjusted his formal insignia nervously. Remind me why we're treating this as a Priority 1 diplomatic event. Because, replied Ambassador Ziltka from her floating observation platform, in 12 months, 3 agricultural students have accidentally redefined modern military doctrine, forced us to rewrite xenobiology textbooks, and somehow convinced half our best cadets that they've been approaching warfare completely wrong. Below them, The graduation ceremony proceeded with traditional pageantry, but even the ceremonial protocols felt different now. The Academy's top graduates, representing the finest military minds from dozens of worlds, carried themselves with subtle changes in posture and strategic thinking that experts were calling human contamination. "The influence assessment reports are disturbing," continued General Vothplex of the Hegemony Defense Corps. "Our cadets have abandoned established tactical frameworks in favor of what they term adaptive improvisation protocols. Weapons manufacturers report requests for equipment modifications that didn't exist in military specifications until humans suggested them." Admiral Kestorven watched the ceremony with growing unease. "Are we discussing positive changes or concerning developments?" "Both," Ambassador Ziltka replied. "Combat effectiveness ratings have improved across all species, but the methods are unsettling. Yesterday, a Centaurian cadet asked for permission to requisition emergency violence supplies for a routine patrol mission." On the ceremonial platform, Dean Vothka was delivering the traditional address about honor, service, and galactic cooperation. His words carried undertones of someone who had spent a year reconsidering fundamental assumptions about civilization, warfare, and the nature of peaceful coexistence. "The Academy has always prided itself on preparing the galaxy's finest defenders," Vothka announced to the assembled crowd. "This year's graduating class represents not merely academic achievement, but a revolutionary understanding of what defense truly requires." In the front rows, the human cadets sat with the casual alertness that had become their trademark. They had excelled academically, earned commendations for innovation, and somehow managed to graduate with honors while accidentally traumatizing the Academy's entire educational philosophy. Cadet Martinez achieved the highest scores in strategic planning by developing what she termed controlled chaos deployment, Vothka continued. Cadet Thompson revolutionized logistics management through his aggressive resource reallocation methodologies. Cadet Okafor's contributions to defensive engineering have been classified at the request of multiple governments. Fleet Admiral Kestorven leaned toward Ambassador Ziltka. "Classified? What could an agricultural student discover that requires military classification?" "Apparently improvised fortification techniques that make our most advanced defensive systems look like decorative barriers," she whispered back. "The Engineering Corps has requested permanent consultation rights." The ceremony reached its climax as individual achievements were recognized. Graduate after graduate received commendations that reflected the human influence on their development. Tactical innovation, creative problem-solving, adapted resource management, enhanced survival protocols. "Most concerning," General Vothplex observed, "is how our other species now approach training exercises. They've started requesting realistic challenge parameters and expressing dissatisfaction with simulations they previously found adequately demanding. The humans have convinced an entire generation of military leaders that they were being undertrained," Admiral Kestorven asked. "Worse, they've convinced them that what we considered advanced military preparation was basically recreational activity." As the ceremony concluded, the three humans approached the podium for their special recognition as the Academy's first Deathworld Exchange graduates. They moved with the unconscious coordination of a military unit, despite having no formal combat training beyond what they'd improvised during their Academy tenure. In recognition of their exceptional contributions to military education, Dean Vothka announced, "The Academy is proud to offer Cadets Martinez, Thompson, and Okafor immediate placement in our advanced instructor program. The amphitheater fell silent. Additionally, Volker continued, we have received formal requests from 17 different military academies requesting human consultation on curriculum development. The Galactic Defense Initiative has proposed establishing an entirely new classification system for strategic education based on Earth Standard Preparedness Protocols. Ambassador Ziltka turned to her companions. We've spent centuries developing the most sophisticated military training programs in galactic history, and now we're asking primitive agricultural students to teach us how to do it properly. Primitive agricultural students who evolved on a planet so hostile that surviving childhood there apparently qualifies as elite military training, General Vothplex added grimly. Fleet Admiral Kess Torven watched the humans accept their honors with characteristic, cheerful competence. What does this mean for galactic military doctrine? It means, Ambassador Ziltka replied, that we've discovered we've been playing a children's game while calling it warfare, and the humans didn't even realize we were playing. The humans were now surrounded by eager graduates from across the galaxy, all requesting advice on proper strategic thinking and what they termed real military preparedness. The scene looked less like a graduation ceremony and more like consultation with tactical experts. The irony, General Vothplex observed, is that they still think they're just exchange students sharing study tips. And perhaps that was the most unsettling realization of all, that the galaxy's most accidentally effective military advisors considered their expertise nothing more than common-sense survival skills from back home.